The Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Jeff Brantley.
Welcome in, everybody, to episode 86 of the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. As always, here, your host, Jeff Brantley. Glad to be back with you today on a Friday edition of the show, a massive Friday edition of the show, of course. UFC 262 coming up tomorrow live from Houston, Texas at the Toyota Center. I'm a little extra pumped for this show because not only is this a massive card, we're going to go through it top to bottom today. Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira for the lightweight title, for the vacant lightweight title, by the way. Again, Khabib stepping away in October, retiring. So we have that on the line on Saturday night, plus the co-main event. We have Tony Ferguson taking on Beneil Dariush. We were supposed to have Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards on this card. I was super bummed when that did not happen, when that fight was forced to be pulled off of that and moved to later, the next pay-per-view, but I don't think it matters, honestly. This card is still awesome, as I've been saying all week. We get Ferguson, we get Dariush in the co-main event of the evening. We have some other bangers of fights on this card. Shane Burgos, Edson, Barboza, a ton to go over on episode 86 of the podcast today, and that's where you want to be right here, as we're going to preview this card top to bottom. Mostly that main card, again, going to go heavy into that, but I'll also get into some of the other fights we have coming up Saturday night from the Toyota Center on UFC 262, so you won't want to miss that. I was also tweeting out some live quotes from the UFC 262 press conference, which, by the way, just wrapped up. I know it's Friday morning. I know it's Friday this podcast is coming out, but I'm recording this late Thursday right now, and then it'll come out Friday, of course. But that presser just wrapping up, and I have some takeaways from that. I'm going to put some of those quotes, some of the meaningful things we saw into the preview today, and actually the Tony Ferguson part of today's portion of the show. When I talk about him taking on Dariush, that preview, I actually have some interesting audio clips to play back for you today, as Tony Ferguson, definitely the highlight, and I talked about it earlier this week on episode 85. Tony Ferguson, always the quirky guy that he is, right? Always the quirky personality, also always saying the outlandish things. He brought it again today at the UFC 262 press conference. I'm going to bring back some of those quotes today for you, a few of them, as he was going after everybody, but I'll also, again, preview his co-main event against Beneil Dariush. So a lot coming up on tonight's show. Of course, I was supposed to have my guy Luke Lampe on to talk about the betting side of things. I'll still throw a few betting things here in there. Actually, Luke unfortunately had to jump off, had some other work projects going on, so he wasn't able to join me tonight. We'll get Luke on in the next couple weeks here. So you're riding solo with me today on episode 86, but doesn't matter. I'm pumped. I'm really excited for this event coming up Saturday night, and this is, again, where you want to be, the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Brantley. Same thing on Instagram, guys, at Jeff_Brantley. Make sure you do that. Also, go to the website, maninthecagemma.show. That is the website for the podcast, so you can get my social media there, and you can get all the other ways to listen and watch the show now. Again, we're on YouTube for, eventually I'm going to get to like the 100th episode on YouTube, and it'll still feel like I've only done 10 YouTube shows, but I'll say this is like the 8th or 9th YouTube show we've done here. So go check us out on YouTube. Again, the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. Subscribe to that way you get the latest notifications whenever a new video drops. Also, go and check out the podcast, all the audio versions. I know a lot of you are driving in your cars, you're with your kids, late at night, whatever you're doing, getting ready for the next day. You want to listen to the audio version, you can check us out on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, guys. So go subscribe there as well. And all of that, just recircling around here to how that impacts or how that deals with the website. The website has all of that as well. So you can go and just check it out on your own, or you can make it easy and just go to maninthecagemma.show. There's also some merchandise up there. I was wearing my official Man in the Cage MMA and Podcast t-shirt merchandise last time. You can go check that out. Some swag up there. Again, socks, t-shirts, sweatshirts for the cool times of year. Go check that out, maninthecagemma.show. And then also a support the show button up there. You can support the show little as $1 a month, all the way up to $10 a month. And then you can also check out my other betting show, which I do a side betting show as well, the Man in the Cage Sports Betting Show, which I put other bets out there, soccer, baseball, but intertwine all of that with the combat sports game, boxing, MMA, all of that good stuff. So go check it out, maninthecagemma.show. All right, everybody, let's get into it today. Again, UFC 262, Saturday night, as I said, Michael Chandler taking on Charles Oliveira for the vacant lightweight title. Of course, Khabib stepping away in October after he beat Justin Gaethje. The UFC, Dana White basically begging Khabib for months and months, and Dana White even teased a LeBron-like decision on their the ABC One telecast that he had some big Khabib news. And then it was basically no news. So Khabib is retired. He's went away, of course, fully, at least for right now. And that's something we've talked about on this show, that Khabib's just a little bit different. When he says he's going to walk away, I believed Khabib that he's going to walk away. Doesn't mean he's always going to be away, but for right now, I do believe he's away. So that opens up a title shot for Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira coming up Saturday night. It should be a very, very good fight. I mean, this fight on paper is just so fantastic. And that's where we're going to start right here. And I'll get into what both of these men do well and what they don't do well in a second here. But let's start off here with that. And you know, just my initial thoughts. You know, no strengths or weaknesses yet. None of that stuff. No official prediction. Just what I've seen this week. And I've tweeted it out again at Jeff_Brantley many times on social media that I think this fight is really close on paper. And I think both of these men have some equal strengths, and I also think they have some equal weaknesses. I'm also excited more than anything because, as I just mentioned with the Khabib era, and the Khabib, you know, the fights that we saw him in, and him be one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time, being 29-0, and all the title defenses he had, even the one back in October against Justin Gaethje, all very high-level stuff, right? All great fights. You know, Khabib was never in a fight necessarily where you said, you know, this isn't high-level stuff. This is, you know, every fight was Khabib dominating. It was Khabib doing a lot of things that a lot of other people couldn't. Now, I'm not saying that Michael Chandler or Charles Oliveira in this fight, I'm not saying either of these guys could beat Khabib. I'm not saying they couldn't either. I'm not making those predictions. All I'm going to say is that the UFC coming out of that era, though, with Khabib being that dominant and showing how great the UFC lightweight division just is, this is the exact fight that the UFC needs and what mixed martial arts needs and us fans want, that you have two high-level guys who are going to put it all on the line, not going to be scared to throw, not going to be scared to do really much anything in this fight. You know, they're going to go out there swinging. Knockout, submission, even if they get subbed, knocked out themselves, they don't care. This is a great fight. It's a high-level fight. It's the fight the UFC, it's the fight mixed martial arts needs for the lightweight division coming out of the Khabib era. Now, the fight itself, when you dig deeper, I think you find more things, and this is just me again. There's people out there, I know Twitter followers of some people that disagree with me on this one, but when I just look, when I videotape, and again, I tape all of these fights before I talk about them. When you tape both of these men, and trust me, I've seen so many Michael Chandler fights over the year in Bellator. Most people on Twitter know I'm a big Bellator guy. I was a Bellator guy before Bellator even did this rebranding. So I've seen so many Michael Chandler fights over the years, as many of you diehard MMA fans have of course, as well. But I've seen so many Chandler fights that even just watching all the Charles Oliveira tape and him getting even better, and I will stress that in what I'm about to say too at the end here, that Charles Oliveira has gotten better and better. But I think when you really look at it, Chandler has little small edges in this fight. I'm going to call them little small edges. Again, I'm not saying that Oliveira can't come out and, you know, submit him, knock him out, win by decision. I just think that on paper, this is a great fight, but on paper too, Chandler has these small edges. And I think one of the big ones is in the striking department. You watch Charles Oliveira in his striking, you watch the shootbox style, and you watch everything he's done in all of his past fights, the Kevin Lee fight, all of those, even the latest Tony Ferguson fight. He has gotten better over time, but there's still little holes in his game. He's still very weak, and he's still very open to a straight right hand, which Michael Chandler throws very well. And he's still very square at times. You know, he's right here with his guard, no head movement sometimes, right in front of you. Footwork gets a little sloppy, especially when you try to pressure him a little bit more. That's when it can get a little sticky for Charles Oliveira. Now, here's again where the flip side of this, you watch all the weaknesses, and you do see a lot of improvements over every single fight. You watch one fight to the next, he's getting smoother, he's getting slicker, and mind you, again, this is a submission guy, this is a jiu-jitsu guy. You know, we've seen guys like Jacqueline, Souza, who's also on this card, or other jiu-jitsu guys. Wrestlers even like, we'll bring up Ben Askren here, who couldn't strike to save his life. We saw that in the Jake Paul fight. What a terrible disaster that was, him getting knocked out by a YouTuber. He couldn't box. He couldn't strike. He had no hands. Charles Oliveira's developed a good enough skill set, a good enough striking skill set that he can compete with guys like Michael Chandler. And it would not surprise me if he landed something big in this fight. Because I'll get to the Chandler weaknesses in a second, because he does have some as well. And that's one of them. You know, you can land here and there on Michael Chandler because he is somewhat of a smaller guy. He is somewhat of a smaller lightweight, although athletic, very explosive. he has to rush into the pocket, right? And I just mentioned his straight right hand, and it is very good. And that's where I think the small, getting back to that real quick, wrapping that up and then going full circle here, talking about Michael Chandler a little bit, I think that's where Chandler does have a small edge in the striking department, where Oliveira does eat that straight right a lot. The Kevin Lee fight, he ate it multiple times. He tends to drop his shoulder a little bit. He tends to eat that shot. That's something to watch out in this fight, and it's where I think if Chandler times that correctly, I think if he comes into the pocket, throws that jab, feints with that jab, also throws that body shot. That's what he did against Dan Hooker. You go back and watch the Dan Hooker fight, his first fight in the UFC. Dan Hooker was really keen on, I'm not going to stand in front of him, I'm going to make this guy chase me. And also, I think Hooker had the mindset of, let's tire this guy out. He's got some butterflies. This is his first UFC fight. Let's tire him out a little bit. Let's make him chase us. It was working for a little bit, but eventually Chandler, walking him down, throwing that body shot, was able to change the levels of his strikes. And that's what Chandler does so well too, is he throws those shots to the body, those boxing combinations to the body, that straight right, and then he'll come back upstairs. He's very good at that. We've seen that over the years in Bellator. He did that against Dan Hooker, and you could see something similar here against Charles Oliveira, especially, again, as I said, I think Charles Oliveira is going to be there to be hit. The flip side, though, of this, and the Chandler weaknesses, Chandler, the fights we've seen against Patricio Pitbull in Bellator and some of these other fights he struggled in, because he has lost in his career. He's not perfect. He's another guy who's climbed, and I don't know how much Chandler can actually improve at this point, but he's pretty close to being obviously a title-worthy lightweight in the UFC division. But he's right there where he has to be. So he's not going to get any better necessarily, but he still has some of those moments, right, against Patricio Pitbull and others where if you time him right, you can catch him as well, because he does have to explode into the pocket. You can catch him. If you feint right, you do certain things, you can catch him. And I will say that about Charles Oliveira again here. Another strength for Oliveira, I just mentioned his kicking game. He's got some other great weaknesses. Again, I'll get to the grappling, which could be a very, very interesting part of this fight. But Oliveira, he has a very good check hook. I don't love a ton of his boxing combinations. I love some of them. You go back to the Nick Lentz fight. The right hand he lands, very smooth. He's getting much slicker with that right hand. He's getting much slicker with his boxing in general, his combinations, his uppercuts, those type of things. But one thing he always has been very good at is he does have a very good check hook. So, if Chandler explodes into the pocket, Oliveira catches him correctly with that check hook, could be good night again, because that's how Patricio Pitbull knocked out Michael Chandler. Ended up catching him before Chandler could catch him. So Oliveira will have some openings in this fight as well, but I think striking-wise, I give just a slight advantage to Michael Chandler. But there's going to be openings for both men there. Ground-wise, Charles Oliveira is going to have a huge advantage in the jiu-jitsu department. My issue, though, with Charles Oliveira having that big jiu-jitsu advantage, and why I am factoring it in, and again, he could catch Chandler sleeping in this fight, could catch Chandler being a little too aggressive, and I actually think that's Charles Oliveira's best game plan, would be trying to trap him, trying to get him to be too aggressive, come in, submit him, find a way to use that jiu-jitsu. The biggest problem I have with that for Oliveira, though, is against Tony Ferguson, he was able to use some good wrestling, and I do think Charles Oliveira does have some underrated wrestling. But against a guy like Michael Chandler, who is actually a pure wrestler first, who is an athletic guy, it's going to be very tough for him. Michael Chandler's much more strong. He's much stronger than Tony Ferguson. He's much more athletic. No offense to Tony Ferguson. I don't want Tony Ferguson calling me out. I don't want to be on his hit list like everybody was today at the UFC 262 press conference, which I'll get to in the co-main event in a second here. But Michael Chandler's much more athletic. He's much harder to get down. And Oliveira is going to have to find some creative ways to get him there. And we saw in the Kevin Lee fight, it'll work if you can submit a guy. And if you have as good a jiu-jitsu as Charles Oliveira does, it's not a problem sometimes. Same thing even with guys like Tony Ferguson. We've seen Mackenzie Dern in the women's divisions. If you do have that good of jiu-jitsu, you can be okay, pulling guard. You can be okay being on bottom. You can find ways to be on bottom, sweep, get your way on top. So Charles Oliveira could do that, but you still have to get it there. And we saw in the Kevin Lee fight that, yes, he was trying to find some submissions. He was definitely reversing some positions. He was definitely sweeping Kevin Lee a bunch of times, but Kevin Lee was still on top of a lot of those exchanges. If the fight goes a little different, if fights go a little different in the past, and again, this is what coulda, shoulda, maybe it's a different outcome. You just have to be careful of that. And that's my biggest problem with Oliveira's having that jiu-jitsu advantage, that he should use it. And I do think that's his best path to victory here. I think Oliveira's best path to victory, and maybe I'll go over that real quick, and then I'll give my prediction of how I think each guy should attack this fight, would be Oliveira would be strike, use your kicks, try to use your check hook, and then try to find a creative way to get on the ground without giving up too many positions, and or if you have to, then give up position and try to use your jiu-jitsu on the ground, try to sweep, try to get a submission off your back. I think that's Charles Oliveira's best path to victory in this fight. Again, I could be wrong. I did mention the check hook there. I could be wrong, though. Maybe he comes out and he's got super slick combinations, times his feints well, uses his jab, hits Michael Chandler with a straight right, knocks him out. Maybe he does that. But I think his best option in this fight for Charles Oliveira is to use that kicking game, even go to the legs a little bit. I saw in the Dan Hooker fight, Michael Chandler, being as small as he is and being as explosive as he's actually hard to leg kick. He's hard to get those calf kicks on and leg kicks in general because of how he's footwork. He's so good at bouncing in and out, exploding in and out of the pocket, that he stays out of range and then he explodes in only when he's throwing. It can be hard, but when he is in that range where you can throw those leg kicks, Oliveira would be smart to throw those leg kicks, throw some check hooks, use some combinations when you can, and then try to get the fight to the ground and use that super slick jiu-jitsu. Because although Michael Chandler's got a wrestling background, takedown defense is definitely there. He's not he's training with some great jiu-jitsu guys. He's trained with Gilbert Burns down in Florida. He's trained with Kamaru Usman. It's still not the same, I don't think. He's not going to be that level still. Michael Chandler, maybe another shocking thing. Maybe he shocks me here, but Charles Oliveira is going to have that advantage there. So I think that should be Charles Oliveira's game plan in this fight. And for Michael Chandler, as I just mentioned, it's just try to stay away from those takedowns. Don't get sucked to the ground if you can. I think Kevin Lee a couple times, and it's hard sometimes because when a guy is giving you positions, especially a guy like Kevin Lee who's even looking to wrestle more so than Michael Chandler is, it's hard not to take those, get into top control, get into those full guard moments. It's hard not to do that, but it's dangerous. You play a dangerous game when you do that. So for Chandler, it's not getting sucked to the ground as much. If you can, stand back up. Don't get taken down, and then try to explode into the pocket. Try to exploit some of those things. Try to land that big right hand. His footwork, as I said, very good exploding in and out. Time that right hand. Throw some shots to the body, and then let that power go. Because Michael Chandler's got some serious power, and I think that is something that is actually underrated about Michael Chandler, is his power. And I think Dan Hooker felt that. Dan Hooker, a guy who's normally very tough. Look at the Edson Barboza fight. He gets knocked out versus Barboza, but Barboza took it to him for rounds, right? Body shots, nasty kicks, a lot. I would have went down from one of those shots. Dan Hooker took that for rounds, right, before he crumbled. He took one shot from Michael Chandler, one boxing combination, one left hand, and he went down. Now, Chandler followed it up with some other strikes, but still, one shot from Michael Chandler put him to the canvas. It hurt him really bad in that fight, and he was able to finish the fight. So Chandler's got to be looking to explode in, use that one shot, and take over from there. I do think it'll be interesting if this fight goes deeper, because I think that, both these guys, especially Chandler, very explosive, very athletic, but I think as Chandler, we've seen this in Bellator a little bit, as he goes deeper into the fight, he does tend to slow down just a little bit, just because he is so athletic. He's not the type to necessarily gas out completely, but I would be curious to see there who would have the advantage. Charles Oliveira, we've seen him deep in some fights, but he's subbing people, he's knocking people out very early in a lot of these fights, first, second, third, round of fights. So it would be interesting to see who would have the advantage there. I really don't know the answer to that right now. Maybe Oliveira, but that would be a very fun one to see later in the fight. But again, Chandler does have championship experience. That's something you have to equate into the situation here, that Chandler has fought for belts before. Did he leave the Bellator promotion with the belt? No, but did he fight for a bunch of them and actually hold one at one point? Yes, he did. So, that's something that that Oliveira is going to have to get over a little bit here. That Charles Oliveira, this is his first championship fight. Doesn't mean he can't win it, but so there's definitely some things going for Chandler going into this fight. So the championship experience, now even adding that to that, I think it's a slight advantage. I think striking's a slight advantage. I think the ground's pretty even. Again, Oliveira's got that jiu-jitsu, but I think he's going to have to play with fire. It's going to be a tightrope game that you take Chandler to the ground like that. He might have to pull guard sometimes. If Chandler plays as smart, if he scrambles correctly, if he does the correct things that some other guys have done in the past, like a Paul Felder against Charles Oliveira, Oliveira might put himself in some compromising position. So I'm going to give the slight edge to Michael Chandler here. And as you can probably tell, I'm actually going to pick Michael Chandler in this fight. And I've been, actually the next fight, Dariush versus Ferguson, I'm actually that's the only fight I'm surprisingly, and I'm going to give my reasoning who I'm going to pick in a second on that fight, the co-main event. But I'm going to slightly go with Michael Chandler here. And I've been going back and forth all week because I could see both men winning. I actually like both these fighters. This is one of those fights where I like Oliveira, I like Michael Chandler. Tying in the UFC 262 press conference today. Both these guys just an intensity about them. A confidence and an intensity that matches each other. And it's not fake, and it's also not McGregor versus Diaz. They're not throwing water bottles at each other. They're not doing anything like that. Even the stare down today, very intense. They're not touching each other. They're not shoving each other. There's just this quiet intensity about Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira that you have to love. And you saw that at the press conference today. And it was cool to hear Michael Chandler. We read off some of his quotes from UFC 262 Countdown early in the week. But you have to love Michael Chandler talking about coming from Bellator. And, they're asking him questions about, do you feel you belong? Oh, the people that say you don't deserve a title shot. And him saying, I love my resume. I love what I've done. Not really biting on that bait, but just basically saying, listen, I believe in myself. I fought at a high level in Bellator. I belong here. The confidence there to say, it doesn't matter what anybody's saying about me. I was great in Bellator. I'm going to be great here in the UFC. And then Charles Oliveira, same thing, saying that this is his time and learning from his losses in the past. You have to love all that. There's a quiet intensity about this fight. And it's going to be awesome. It's all going to percolate Saturday night, UFC 262. I can't wait for it. My official pick, though, I'm going with Michael Chandler. I think he wins the fight. I think he might even win by knockout. I think if he catches Charles Oliveira right, which I think he can with that straight right hand, as I said, I think it could be lights out for Charles Oliveira. I do think this is one of those fights, though, that probably doesn't go the distance either way. If Chandler doesn't get a knockout early, first, second, third round, starts to get a little tired late, or, Oliveira, maybe they start playing more of a cat and mouse game on the ground again. I wouldn't, Oliveira slapping a guillotine on him, catching his head, catching the neck, finding a way to take his back. I would not be surprised about that either. So I don't think this fight goes the distance either way. But I think I'm going to go Michael Chandler, round 2 knockout over Charles Oliveira. Early in round 2, I think he catches him, if not round 1. I think it's just too there to be hidden. And again, we'll see what happens. Charles Oliveira has been improving every single fight out. He could improve again here against Michael Chandler. Surprise us all. The check hook's there, as I said. The jiu-jitsu's better if he can find a way to really capitalize on it without giving too many positions away. But I'm going to go Michael Chandler by knockout in round 2 of that one. All right, on to the co-main event of the evening. Tony Ferguson taking on Beneil Dariush in what I'll dub the loser goes home match. And that's why this fight is, I think, even it has a lot more, even especially after the UFC 262 press conference today, which I'll play you back some audio in a second here that, as I mentioned, Tony Ferguson, the star of the show today, just going after everybody. I mean, a little bit of Dana White, a little bit of Khabib, a little bit of Michael Chandler, definitely Beneil Dariush, which is surprising. Dariush, quiet guy. Ferguson going after everybody. Some interesting quotes from him. I'm going to play back some of that audio. So that adds to the intensity here, but also part of the intensity and why I think Tony Ferguson and Dariush now kind of have this tension building up a little bit is this is, in my opinion, a loser goes home match. And what I mean by that is one of these guys lose, I don't think they're getting cut by the UFC necessarily. I don't think it means they're necessarily never going to fight in another title fight ever again or have another shot ever again or be in a big fight ever again. But whoever wins this match, whoever wins this fight, they're going to keep their relevance in this division. You have Tony Ferguson, who's getting older now, who's coming off of 2 losses in a row. He's coming off of the beating he took against Justin Gaethje. He's coming off of a drubbing. He's never going to admit it, but the drubbing he took to Charles Oliveira, where Oliveira pretty much broke his arm, right? Almost broke his arm. I mean, I think Ferguson came out afterwards and said there was no break there, but he practically broke Tony Ferguson's arm with that arm bar. Most people would have submitted to that. So for all intents and purposes here, Tony Ferguson should be coming off 2 stoppage losses in a row. Now he gets Beneil Dariush here. If Tony Ferguson wins this fight, he keeps himself in the relevancy of the division here. That does have Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor facing off later this July. You have Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira on this card fighting for the title. You have some other guys mixed in there, right? But Tony Ferguson can be right there with all of those guys with a win here. Same thing with Beneil Dariush. Dariush on a massive run right now. Massive momentum coming into this fight. If Dariush wins this fight, a guy who's also not a spring chicken himself, a little bit, he's around the same age as Tony. this is another, if he wins, he can boost himself up. He can say, I beat Tony Ferguson. He can boost himself into that relevancy, maybe even take Tony Ferguson's spot. So this is kind of a loser goes home match a little bit, that whoever loses this is going to have a large uphill battle to climb to get to that title. It's a very cloudy division. Who knows if, I just said Khabib walked away. I think he's away for right now, but if Conor wins the title, if Poirier wins the title, if Michael Chandler wins the title here, if Charles Oliveira does well in the title here, maybe Khabib does come out of retirement. That's always going to be there, which will push everybody else down again. So it's a big fight for both these guys. A loser goes home match a little bit, and that's why they're going to bring it. That's why we saw some of the intensity at the UFC 262 press conference today, which, again, I'll play some of those comments in a second here. But let's just go through the fight first, how I see this playing out, because it's going to be an interesting one. Both these guys' styles, they really play well off each other. Both guys in your face, fun styles. A lot of brawling exchanges probably in this fight. A lot of striking exchanges. The jiu-jitsu exchanges, if they happen, wrestling exchanges should be a lot of fun as well. Both these guys even there as well, and that's why even though we lost Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards, which would have still been a very good fight, especially the Leon Edwards angle of things, this is equally as good in my opinion here. And it'll be interesting to see if Tony Ferguson, which is the biggest question mark going into this fight, can get over some of the things we've seen in his past two fights that have plagued him. Again, I'll go over strengths and weaknesses here. Beneil Dariush, he's got a good Muay Thai background. Throws some good combinations. He shows off some good head movement. He's got great, has throws some great kicking combinations sometimes. We saw in the fight against Scott Holtzman, he landed some good body shots with his kicks in that fight. He's got the jiu-jitsu that's there. He hasn't showed it off his last fight actually showed it off a little bit more. But in other fights he hasn't, but he's got a good jiu-jitsu background. So he's got all of that. Then you have Tony Ferguson, who has used so many different angles when he's on, and so many different crafty things that he gives you so many different looks. He's hard to prepare on the feet. He uses a pretty decent jab, which can go underrated sometimes with those angles. And then he shows off those crazy submissions. And even in the Charles Oliveira fight, although he was getting kind of whipped in that fight, that was still a fight where he still had some moments that were Tony-esque. Tony's going for submissions that normally fighters wouldn't be hunting for. Good and bad, because you heard on that broadcast Joe Rogan and those guys at times saying, why is he going for this? Like, he's not going to get this. Why is he going for this? So good and bad, but that's still Tony Ferguson. So these guys match up very well. It's going to be a very fun fight. But the biggest question, because, Dariush is riding high. We know what Beneil Dariush is. He's quiet. He comes forward. He comes to hit you. He's lost. He's gotten over it, the Alexander Hernandez fight. But he comes, he brings it. He shows off that striking. He moves his head. He does some very good things. But for Tony Ferguson, what we've seen the last two fights, we haven't seen the same old Tony. We haven't seen Tony Ferguson. We saw him getting hit a lot in the Justin Gaethje fight. He gets TKO'd there. The Charles Oliveira fight, he's getting hit. He gets dominating in wrestling exchanges. The jiu-jitsu getting dominated there by Charles Oliveira. So what's the deal with Tony? I think that's the biggest question going into this one. But if you go back and you watch all of the Tony Ferguson fights, all of them, even the Kevin Lee fights, even the ones he's winning on all that winning streak, right? Because it feels like forever ago now, but there was once upon a time where Ferguson, of course, the interim champion, was lined up to fight Khabib last May or before the pandemic. He's on a fight winning streak, hadn't lost since 2012, but even in that winning streak, you go back and watch a lot of those fights. Tony Ferguson was eating a lot of shots in that fight, but he endured it. I think that's important to remember, because me, myself, I've done this too in his last two fights. I've thought, Tony Ferguson, something's missing there. Something's different about him. But you go back and you watch it and you remind yourself, he was getting hit a lot in those fights too. He was getting taken down a lot in those fights. He was losing a lot of those exchanges. The Kevin Lee fight, again, go back and watch it. First round, the last minute or so, Kevin Lee's mounted on him, fully mounted, and he's landing elbows and he's landing a lot of shots. And had that been at the 3-minute mark of the first round, again, woulda, coulda, shoulda, whatever, what happened. But if you would have done that at the 3-minute mark, the 2-minute mark of the fight, he might have stopped Tony Ferguson in that fight. He might have been able to. So you go back and watch those, and it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for Tony. He was getting hit. He was getting taken down. So what was the difference? The biggest difference for me was that Ferguson and all those other fights, he found ways to endure, and he also found some El Cucuy magic, if you will. You know what I mean? Like, El Cucuy found ways. The Kevin Lee fight, he finds a way to submit him when he's maybe losing it or it's a close fight. The Anthony Pettis fight, he gets stunned, and he's rolling around, and even at one point he rolls into where Anthony Pettis almost is able to take his back or start landing some shots from a back position. So, but he still found a way to roll out. he found some El Cucuy magic in those fights. He wasn't able to against Justin Gaethje and Charles Oliveira. Again, can you equate it to him getting a little bit older? Maybe a little bit. Also, could you equate it to the biggest thing for me is the coaching angle of things. His coaching was terrible in the Justin Gaethje fight. I don't think it was much better, at least the preparation wasn't much better going into the Charles Oliveira fight. So now he gets a spot here against Dariush to prove people wrong or get back on top here, really show that he can still be the same Tony Ferguson. But Willie, in my opinion here, this is a good... I think this is a perfect fight for Dariush, especially early on. Tony Ferguson, as I mentioned, he's getting hit early on in all of his other fights. There's no reason to make you think Beneil Dariush won't land early in this fight. Round one's going to go to Beneil Dariush. It should go to Beneil Dariush. If he doesn't win round one, he's in trouble because Dariush is known to fade a little bit, of course, sometimes over the course of a fight. But round one, Dariush, if he's moving his head and he's looking slick, I think he can really sit down on some shots, really start to put a little bit of a hurting on Tony Ferguson. And he said that much in the UFC 262 countdown piece where he said, my goal is to, when I sit down on my shots, especially early, I have to hurt him because I have to let him know, you don't want to be exchanging with me. I think he can do that early on. The question will be later on in the fight, as I said, round 2, round 3, because that's where Tony is great. Tony is tough. He didn't tap to Charles Oliveira. He did stay in the fight. His cardio is insane. I mean, the Joe Rogan podcast, there's so many guys who will, Eddie Bravo, all those guys, they'll talk about Tony Ferguson's endurance, how he's running up hills like a madman and not slowing down or getting heavy breathed at all. Tony Ferguson will be there cardio-wise. You have to put Tony Ferguson away or you have to stay on him. It's what Justin Gaethje did. It's what Charles Oliveira did. It's what Beneil Dariush is going to have to do here. Now, can he? And I keep going back and forth on this all week because I do think Dariush, if he starts to fade, I do think Ferguson could show some of that El Cucuy magic off again. To me, though, I do think Dariush can. And the thing that makes me think he can is because Ferguson won't be able to go to... What is for, in the Kevin Lee fight, what does he go to? He goes to those submissions, right? Starts catching Kevin Lee in his guard. Starts throwing up submissions off his back. Dariush he's a black belt. You're not going to catch Dariush in those. You get Dariush on the ground. We saw that in his last fight out. Jiu-jitsu-wise, he's not uncomfortable. So I think even if he slows down a little bit, I think Dariush is going to be able to stay in the fight jiu-jitsu-wise. Ferguson won't be able to bail himself out with that, and he's going to have to strike. And if he hasn't made big leaps and bounds, which he's went to the wild card gym, I'm curious to see if he does some things a little different. Yes, he can. But what we've seen from the Tony in the past, I like Dariush striking a little bit better. So I'm going to pick Beneil Dariush here. I don't know if he finishes Tony Ferguson. Wouldn't surprise me. But, the Charles Oliveira fight, I thought Ferguson would have got finished in that fight. So I'm going to say he doesn't finish him. But I think Dariush takes this a split decision or a unanimous decision. I think he does enough in this fight to win it. If he can just win round 1, as I said, which I think he will, win most of round 2, even if he starts to fade enough in round 3 where Ferguson takes it, eventually Dariush is still going to get the decision. So I'm going to pick Beneil Dariush here, but, Tony Ferguson, he's going to have to switch something up here. And that's where game plan changing, the coaching's all going to be different. If he doesn't, I said earlier in the week, I think it could be a short, depending on if he gets stopped or not, a short or a long night for Tony Ferguson once again. But it should be a very interesting fight. He had some interesting comments at UFC 262. I was going to play those for you actually today, but I'm running a little short on time, so let me put those. I already tweeted them out on Twitter at Jeff_Brantley, but I'll also throw them up online if you want to go listen to them, and there's some other media outlets out there. But, Tony Ferguson going after everybody, and I think part of that with that UFC 262 presser today is him, and this is where I have a problem with the mentality again, and I wonder if he's actually changed some things or not, because you have to fix the problems that are there. You can't just walk into a fight and blame something else. Again, maybe the mentality shift, I should say maybe the more aggressive mentality shift that Tony Ferguson's trying to go with here, maybe that'll be the difference, but in my opinion, it's not. I think you have to go out there. I think you have to switch some things up, and he wasn't, based off of what you're hearing at UFC 262 presser today. He's getting mad at Khabib. He's saying some things. He's talking to Michael Chandler, saying he dodged him. He's going at Dana White a little bit. He's also going at Beneil Dariush, saying a lot of things that, he's going to knock him out. He's going to slam him just like his student, that type of thing. I think he's trying to psych himself up a little bit. I think he's trying to find some of that El Cucuy magic, which, again, maybe it works for him, but in my opinion, I think he's going to have to switch some things up. It doesn't just work, especially as you get older as an athlete sometimes. You got to switch some things up. You can't just expect to be more, I'm going to get more mad and I'm going to win fights. No, it doesn't work that way all the time. Maybe it works that way Saturday night. It doesn't work that way all the time, though, and I guarantee it won't work moving forward. So I hope Tony Ferguson has taken some steps to improve some things. If he can, I think he could get his hand raised here versus Dariush. He's going to have every chance to do so. Dariush is in your face. But I'm still going to take Beneil Dariush here. I think he gets the job done. I think he gets his hand raised by decision. All right, let's keep moving down the list here to the other fights coming up on Saturday night, including the next one that was actually moved to the main card here. Matt Schnell taking on Jairo Bontorin. This one should be a fun. I think there's going to be a lot of fun grappling exchanges in this one, and maybe this is the way it always works, right? You have Kamaru Usman, way back UFC 245 taking on Colby Covington. Both guys wrestlers, and what do? They slug it out, right? So maybe Matt Schnell and Bontorin, maybe they're just going to decide to box, decide to strike it out. But both these guys have some slick jiu-jitsu, so I think that's what they're going to try to test in this fight. And I think that's where this fight's going to take place. Schnell, very good on the ground. Bontorin coming off of a knockout loss, which will also play into this probably, coming off a knockout loss off of Kai Kara France. This is going to be a fight where I think a lot of grappling heavy exchanges are going to happen. And it's going to be a lot of scrambling, that type of thing. And I do think someone's either going to be submitted or knocked out in this fight. Schnell, one of his recent losses was by knockout. So if Bontorin can get on the inside, break some windows, as Teddy Atlas always says in the boxing world, then Bontorin, I think, could have, maybe he tests that chin of Matt Schnell that wasn't tested the last time out. Now, we'll say Schnell the last time out, though, I'd actually picked against him. Schnell showed off some improvements with that striking, though. He showed off a little better head movement. He looked focused. He looked crisp. If he shows some of that against Bontorin here, I don't think Bontorin's striking is actually, because of the size advantage, he's going to have a 3-inch height, 3-inch reach advantage. If Schnell does some of the things we saw the last time out with his size advantage, I don't think Bontorin, and I say that again, watch, he's going to get caught in 10 seconds. I don't think the striking of Bontorin is going to be that much of an issue for Schnell. Now, once it gets to the ground, scramble heavy, that's where things get a little greasy sometimes. Maybe Bontorin can catch him more in these scrambling exchanges. I still think Schnell wins some of these, though. Schnell, what I've seen from him, I think Schnell's able to beat Bontorin here. I think he finds a submission either rounds 2 or 3. I think eventually he gets to a position where he can either submit or ground and pound Bontorin out of this fight, and I think he wins this one by stoppage at some point, probably by submission, if not by knockout, though. But it should be fun, as I said again. If you like, that's where this is going to be interesting. A crowd coming back, second full crowd of the year for the UFC here in mixed martial arts. A lot of a lot of casual MMA fans, a lot of casual fight fans on Saturday night aren't going to necessarily love all the grappling exchanges, right? Love all the scrambles. So you might hear some boos during this fight, but for you, the diehards, the people that actually understand the sport, this is going to be a fun fight, though. You are going to see some of those, in my opinion, and I do think Schnell will eventually be able to submit Bontorin at some point. But it should be a fun fight on the main card. I understand why they moved it up. A little surprised. I thought they'd move up Munoz a little bit with Jacqueline Souza. That fight, that's the feature prelim. Andre Munoz taking on Jacqueline Souza. Souza a little bit more of a household name, but this is still a fun fight, and I can understand why they brought it up, though, especially because Dana White knows, the UFC knows, as I said, I think there's going to be a finish in this fight. I think it's why they brought this one up, but should be a good one on the main card. All right, next up, we move to the women's flyweight division. You have Caitlin Chookagian coming back to Houston for the first time since she lost by knockout to Valentina Shevchenko. She's taking on Viviane Araujo. Sorry, Araujo, that's a tough word to say, I know, but Viviane Araujo there. This should be a fun flyweight contest if you love footwork, right, and striking exchanges. That both of these ladies very good with their footwork. Chookagian very good at moving in and out, poking her jab out there, using her combinations, not staying in the pocket too long. I thought she'd actually use better footwork against Jessica Andrade when she faced her. She wasn't able to do that, but I think she'll be able to do that here against Araujo, her footwork equally as good, where she really likes to move out. She really likes to circle. She likes to come in at different angles. That's what you have to love about Araujo in this fight. At the end of the day, though, who's going to take it? And that's why this is going to look like a very even fight, in my opinion, at times. Now, Araujo, I do think she has a little more power than Chookagian. It's always been Chookagian's downfall, that she doesn't have any power. You're not going to respect Chookagian striking. You're going to walk her down because she's not going to, again, is she hitting her opponents with shots? Do her opponents, do they respect her at certain exchanges? Yes. But still, she doesn't have the knockouts on her resume. So as an opponent, you're not totally worried about it. Even if some sting a little bit, you're going to try to walk her down just a little bit. That's where Araujo with her power could be a little bit of a difference in this fight. But you always got to take that Chookagian grunt factor in the building, that Chookagian's so loud with all of her strikes that she will sway judges. And I would not be surprised if that happens Saturday night too, that these ladies are going to look very even, I think, in some of these striking exchanges where they're going to be moving with their footwork so much in and out that it's going to look a little the same. The difference is Chookagian's going to be grunting in those loud exhales with all of her strikes that martial arts teaches you. If you go to some karate gyms, they'll teach you to be really loud with your exhales, getting all that air out of your stomach with each strike. Caitlin Chookagian does that. And I think that could be the difference here. And it's funny because I was actually going to joke around with my guy Luke Lampy about that full crowd actually gets to hear the Caitlin Chookagian grunts or exhales in this fight with every single strike. I think it could actually lead to a victory here. It has in the past. It's a theory. I think it's a real theory. I think it could happen here too against Araujo. But again, Araujo's got good footwork. It's going to be a close fight. Chookagian's never in a fight necessarily, especially once she wins, unless she's really moving in and out, really moving in and out where you go, oh, she's outright the winner, 30-27 or more. It's probably going to be a 29-28 somebody. I'm going to go Chookagian by decision. I think she gets it just because I said I think her strikes are going to be a little more known to the judges. I think the crowd's going to be hearing that. I think they might play into it. I think it might sway the judges. So I'm going to go Caitlin Chookagian by decision in that one. And then finally here, and then I'll run through the rest of the list here in a second, or maybe even tomorrow when I come back on after the weigh-in show. Maybe I'll do that, as well as tweet them out on Twitter, @Jeff_Brantley, right before the fights, all my picks there. And by the way, again, I'll be live from the Toyota Center. I won't be live from the I will be live from the Toyota Center. I won't be broadcasting live from the Toyota Center, but I will be there Saturday night for all of these fights. So I'll be tweeting out everything before and after, @Jeff_Brantley. Go follow me on Twitter. You won't want to miss it. It'll be your experience. If you're not going, your ticket into the building. Again, before and after, all the behind-the-scenes stuff, what's going on in the arena in between fights. Try to bring you some of that coming up Saturday night, so go check that out, @Jeff_Brantley, and then I'll be back tomorrow. As I said, I'll tease more of that in a second here for the weigh-ins. But the final fight I'll talk about more in depth today, the first fight to open the UFC 262 main card, actually, and that's Shane Burgos taking on Edson Barboza. And this, if I had to put money on any of them, okay, to be fight of the night, Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira, great choice. All right. Tony Ferguson, Beneil Dariush, also a very good choice. This might take the cake, though, Shane Burgos and Edson Barboza, if it lasts long enough, though. I put that asterisk on it there, that if it lasts long enough, though, that because both of these guys are going to be slinging. Shane Burgos loves to go throw leather, right? Edson Barboza, we've seen him over the years, loves to dig to the body, loves to throw those nasty kicks. I mean, just absolute nasty kicks. He's got the famous wheel kick that they'll always show, one of the more famous wheel kick knockouts ever in mixed martial arts, especially the UFC. And some Barboza does that. The Dan Hooker fight, I mentioned it earlier, just absolutely took it to Dan Hooker, just throwing kicks to the body, throwing kicks everywhere, throwing some of those boxing combinations, some of those Muay Thai kickboxing combinations. That's Edson Barboza. Both these guys, they're not going to get it twisted. Neither the Tony Ferguson Beneil Dariush fight. It would not surprise me, for instance, if Ferguson came out at one point, maybe even Dariush, tried to get a takedown, right? Try to get some wrestling going. Same thing, Oliveira, Chandler. We just talked about it a little bit earlier. Maybe Oliveira would be better off suited trying to get the fight to the ground. Chandler is a wrestler in his past. He can use some wrestling. These guys aren't going to really mince anything. That they're going to go out there and they're going to sling leather and they're going to try to knock each other out. There's not going to be any. I won't say there's not going to be. You never know that. But these guys aren't going to come out looking to grapple each other. This is going to be a boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai slugfest, which is going to be great for the fans. It's why they keep this. It's why they've kept this fight as the opening fight on the main card. They wanted to get the crowd going in Houston. This one is the one that's going to do it. Shane Burgos is going to come out, as I said, with his boxing combinations. Edson Barboza with his kickboxing. Who's going to win it though? I'm going to take Shane Burgos by either decision or a late stoppage. The reason being is, and I know you look at some of the other fights that Shane Burgos has been in, the Josh Emmett fight, other ones where there's times where he needs to use his jab a little bit more. There's times where he needs to switch things up a little bit more where he could have won fights. Shane Burgos is that type of guy, though, to stay in your face throughout. And so is Edson Barboza. But I do think this new weight class for Edson Barboza, although he's looked pretty good at featherweight, coming down from lightweight, I still think that over time, over the course of the second and third round, you see him slow down, right? And that's just Edson Barboza. He puts on such an insane pace sometimes, especially to start the fight. And Burgos might too here, especially the crowd, that Edson Barboza tends to slow down a little bit. And I think that's where the difference in this fight's going to be, that Burgos has been in some of these drag-out brawls where first round you're going, oh, geez, Burgos is in it, but, man, the other guy's looking great. And then all of a sudden, second and third round, Burgos is still in his face, throwing leather, throwing those boxing combinations. He moves his head pretty well when he wants to. That's the key word, when he wants to. stays in your face, throws those combinations, and I think he's going to do the same thing to Edson Barboza here. I think he keeps walking him down. I think he keeps putting it on him, and I think he starts to wear Barboza down, where second, third round, I think Barboza will lose those rounds on the scorecards, and either that will cost him the decision or he'll get stopped late if Burgos keeps putting it on him like we've seen him do to other guys. But that's my prediction of this fight for this one. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if Barboza won round one, though. I mean, round one's going to be intense. If there's one round you don't want to miss the whole night, it's round one between Edson Barboza and Shane Burgos. Absolutely don't want to miss it. These guys are going to come out fresh. The crowd's going to be going crazy. The pay-per-view just started. These guys want to strike. The crowd knows it as well. And they're going to sit in the center of the octagon, plant and throw. You don't want to miss round one between Shane Burgos and Edson Barboza. I'm going to take Burgos, though, like I said, by a decision or a late stoppage. But should be a barn burner either way. And, if Barboza came out and, hit Burgos with some body kicks, hit him with something nasty, stopped him, or even late in the fight, it would not shock me either there, as Burgos is there to be hit sometimes. So this is a good brawling fight. I don't think it's going to go I shouldn't say I don't think it's going to go the distance, because I do think there's a chance it could. I mean, Barboza's pretty tough. I mean, we saw in the Dan Ige fight. We've seen in other ones Barboza be able to survive, make it to the bell. So I think it's going to be one of those hairy fights that, it might get stopped late. Maybe they make it to the bell type of fights. But it should be a very good one. And again, if I had to put my money anywhere else on this card as far as fight of the night goes, this one would be it. Between Shane Burgos and Edson Barboza, going to be a very, very fun fight. All right, that's the UFC 262 main card. My full predictions there again. I'm going to go with, in the main event, Michael Chandler by knockout, round 2. I'm going to go with, in the co-main event, Dariush by decision. In the other third fight, I'm going to go with Schnell by submission. I'm going to go with Chikagian by decision. And then I'm going to go with, in this one, Burgos by, and I'm copping out a little bit, I know, by not picking one, but I'm going to go Burgos by decision or by a late knockout. But should be a very fun card. I'm going to be in the building. I'm going to be screaming my head off. Probably won't have my voice Monday morning for any of you out there. I'll try to put some videos out there what the crowd atmosphere is like in that one. And as I said, there's some other great fights on this card. As I said, Munoz taking on Jacqueline Souza in the feature prelim. I'm taking Jacqueline Souza in that one, and I'll maybe tweet out some more thoughts on why I'm picking Jacqueline Souza, just so we can get out of here for time reasons. But I'm taking Jacqueline Souza on that one. Jiu-jitsu-wise, it's going to be very fun. Might be some fun exchanges there. Striking, a little bit of a size reach advantage there for Munoz, but Jacqueline Souza, the veteran that he has, I think some of his attitude this week, you could tell after the Kevin Holland loss, Jacqueline Souza knows it's now or never. You might get, the UFC's cutting a lot of fighters lately. They're not going to be afraid to cut Jacqueline Souza if he loses this fight. He's going to be very motivated to keep in there, win this fight. And I think that's what he does coming up on Saturday night in the feature prelim. Some of the other ones on the card, Lando Venata taking on Mike Grundy. Grundy's wrestling might be the difference. Lando Venata, he can be kind of a brawler sometimes. He said he's not going to try to brawl as much moving forward, try to be concentrated. I saw a picture of him on Instagram with his weight cut, Lando Venata. He's looking really cut up right now. He looks like maybe he is taking things a little more serious, if you will, trying to be a little more consistent. I'll go ahead and say Groovy Lando does the job here, but Grundy, if he grinds him out with his wrestling, wouldn't surprise me there either. But that should be a good fight as well. And then, elsewhere on this card, you have Jamie Pickett taking on Jordan Wright. I think that's a sneaky good fight on this card. Jordan Wright coming off of a loss, coming off of a loss against another top guy, as well as Jamie Pickett also coming. Both guys, Dana White Contender Series guys, coming off of losses. Something's got to give here. And maybe we need to get the little, the horn, every time a Dana White's Contender Series fighter who's lost faces another Dana White's Contender Series fighter that's lost, because it's kind of like the UFC saying, hey, you both lost your last fight. We brought you in to be exciting. Now go fight each other and be exciting, and whoever wins, now, not that we're going to cut the other guy, but hey, you guys, you got to prove yourself a little bit here. Go win the fight here. Go put on a show. Do something that makes us want to keep you under the UFC promotion, under the UFC banner. So that should be an interesting one as well, coming up Saturday night on UFC 262. And again, I'll have some thoughts on some of the other fights. I know Gina Mazzani fighting as well on that card. Some others. I'll have some more thoughts coming up tomorrow or today, as you get this podcast on Friday for the UFC weigh-in show. As the UFC weigh-ins are coming up around 8:50 a.m. Central Standard Time. I'm going to be watching those early in the morning, tweeting out with some of those, and then I'm going to try to jump on either live or record a podcast near the end of the weigh-ins tomorrow. Just give some thoughts on if we see anything crazy happen, bad weight cuts, if anyone misses weight. Sometimes it happens, knock on wood. I was knocking on wood the other day. Let me do it again here. on this bookcase here, the shoe case rather. I'm still disheveled because of moving. We've seen stuff like that. Knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't happen, but it does. So I'm going to jump on, talk about that. Also give maybe some thoughts on those other fights I didn't talk about that I talked about right now, and also sum up some of my thoughts on the rest of UFC 262. Maybe go back over that main card once again and send me your thoughts at Jeff_Brantley on Twitter. Same thing on Instagram, guys, at Jeff_Brantley. Betting wise, real quick, I know I didn't get to any of that, and maybe that's what I'll do tomorrow too. I'll bring you some of that I'm running out of time on today's show, so I'll bring some of that tomorrow as well, maybe some of the betting angles for UFC 262 on that live or recorded weigh-in show that I'll bring to you. So make sure you go to YouTube, the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast on YouTube. Subscribe to it just in case, again, I'll go live. If I do go live, I'll tweet it out at Jeff_Brantley. But either way, even if I record it, I'll still tweet it out at Jeff_Brantley, and it'll still be on YouTube, the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast, as well as Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your audio podcasts, guys. Go check it out there as well. Subscribe to it, and then go looping everything back around. Go to the website, maninthecagemmma.show. Easy way to get everything. Even about page. If you want to know why I am the Man in the Cage, go check it out. maninthecagemmma.show, as well as, again, support the show, merchandise, all that good stuff up on the website, maninthecagemmma.show. All right, everybody, UFC 262 just right around the corner. You don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss anything right here on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. Saturday night, some content coming from the arena, as well as, again, tomorrow, as I said, the weigh-in show, some content as well. So go follow every channel. And I want to hear your thoughts, as I said. I know everyone else out there, I've seen some picking, absolutely thinking Charles Oliveira is going to steamroll Michael Chandler. I've seen, some out there saying there's no way Charles Oliveira has any shot in this fight. Same thing with the others. I want to hear your thoughts. Tweet at me. Leave a comment on YouTube, whatever it is, guys. At Jeff_Brantley on Twitter. YouTube, again, Man in the Cage, MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. Let me know your thoughts. I'll read them out on the show. All right, everybody. Have a good rest of your Friday today. We're all right there. As I said, coming up tomorrow will be UFC 262. I'm excited for it, pumped for it, and I'll be back right here later on, as I said, for the next episode, and then later on Monday to recap everything. All right, everybody. Take care. Have a great day, and I'll talk to everybody later.